Yeah, members of the council, in this case, the successor agency. As Joe mentioned, I think the council in different forms has seen part of this presentation. We made a presentation to the oversight board of the successor agency that met for the first time on April 10th to review the Redevelopment Agency of Davis and its enforceable obligation schedules that it's being developed and submitted to the state as well as the county for review. So it was requested that a presentation come back to the council and successor agency to maybe one last time, maybe not, celebrate, I think, some of the accomplishments of what redevelopment has meant for Davis. And, you know, as we go through these, it's always amazing to me to see how quickly we forget how much we really have accomplished and what redevelopment has meant to this community. So I'm going to do the first part of the presentation. Danielle's going to touch on the affordable housing accomplishments of the Redevelopment Agency. And then the second part of the presentation will actually review with you the obligation payment schedule, which we're due to submit to the Department of Finance by May 15th under the legislation deadline. And that obligation payment schedule is for the period of July through December this coming year. So with that, just real quickly, the Davis Redevelopment Agency was established in 1971, believe it or not. California redevelopment law allowed cities and counties to create redevelopment agencies back in 1945. Davis created its agency in 1971. However, it was effectively dormant until about 1987 when the City Redevelopment Agency created a project area, thereby creating a funding mechanism through tax increment to implement its efforts to eliminate blight within that project area. The City Council served as a board of directors, and again, the primary revenue stream for the Redevelopment Agency was through property tax increment. We had pass-through agreements that had been entered into and then amended actually several times throughout the life of the Redevelopment Agency with Yolo County, as well as the Cemetery District and the Flood Control District. In addition, highlight, certainly you're well aware of the pass-through agreements provision with Yolo County that gave the City of Davis land use control outside the city limits, which has been a very important tool for us in our growth management practices. So this aerial here reflects the redevelopment project area when it was first established in 1987. And as you can see, much of the project area was undeveloped, a lot of it in South Davis. Also included the downtown and the industrial area of the community along 2nd Street. This was pre-Mace Ranch, and a lot of development was anticipated to occur on both sides of the freeway. However, very inadequate infrastructure to provide for the development of South Davis and these parts of the community. This is a project area, more or less, as you see it here today, encompasses about 25% of the city, a little over 1,000 acres in total, the project area. Or sorry, I should say, this is what it did incorporate. Effectively no longer exists. So the Redevelopment Agency in its early years really heavily invested in capital infrastructure projects, primarily circulation infrastructure, including Richards Boulevard, widening of the overpass over I-80, and transit demand management measures for the tunnel, as well as the Mace Boulevard interchange widening. Pole Line Road overpass was also 100% funded by Redevelopment Agency. The first two, the Richards and Mace, were part redevelopment, part state funds and impact fees. And then the agency also invested in the Poudre Creek Bike Underpass, which was primarily funded with Redevelopment Agency resources. We turned early in the 90s to look at the downtown. General plan had identified, certainly the core area as the community's central retail, commercial, and cultural district. However, the assets and the investments that we had made really didn't support those policies. And this really was our standard garbage can for downtown. So it began to look to the Redevelopment Agency to partner in how to invest in the condition of downtown to improve it as an environment for not just the social but economic community. So we slowly ticked off the easy, low-hanging fruit, upgraded landscaping and signage to make downtown a much more pedestrian-friendly and appealing environment. Then we also took a look at some of our more problematic, sort of forgotten spaces downtown and assembled rights to improve these alleyways and transform them into real pedestrian environments that provide functionality as well as opportunities for aesthetics. And I'll note that when we did this improvement, it was actually a senior project of mine when I was at UC Davis to create this alleyway. And part of the vision was to create murals on the back of these buildings, and I'll I guess tout that we are now working with the local arts community to see if we can finally implement those murals in conjunction with the Pence Gallery and the arts community. So looking forward to seeing that come to fruition after 15 years. We also had several civic places that we had created back in the 60s that had been overlooked in terms of maintenance and really weren't contributing to the downtown. And we made some subtle investments just to make those much more appealing places. This was our town square, honestly, back in the 90s and 80s when I was going to high school. I hung out on this bench right here, got my ice cream after Little League games, and this was our public square. So socially, it was kind of the center of town, but it really didn't obviously have the level of amenity and environment to support the real culture that wanted to gather there.
Imagine what you
Exactly. I could have been, one of these pleasant, happy people here listening to music in the plaza on a Friday night. So again, the redevelopment agency, was the main funder in converting part of this parking lot into a civic space and improving the balance of the parking lot. Central Park, obviously, is probably our crown jewel in terms of civic spaces in this community. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, Central Park just consisted of the area north of 4th Street. 4th Street used to go through the park. And the city, after a failed attempt to convert this gravel lot to a retail project, decided to take a different course and expand Central Park. And certainly you all know this very well. It's a great civic amenity, and the farmers market is a national, international acclaimed farmers market, and certainly transformed the community in many ways. And then the agency also assisted in some other blighted properties downtown. Union Pacific, or actually Southern Pacific, owned a lot of assets, and in their bankruptcy, they decided to sell off some assets, and we were the beneficiary of snatching up some of those. Their depot downtown, as well as some other properties the agency acquired, and then sought state and federal transportation dollars to turn it into a legitimate, viable multimodal station, and now is the second highest volume station on the Capitol Corridor in terms of boarding and lightings, and 23rd in the nation. So we leveraged about $400,000 of redevelopment agency money in capital and acquisition against about $2.2 million in federal and state dollars to transform the train station into a great transportation amenity for the community. We also took care of some drainage issues. The downtown, being our oldest part of the community, was not built with the idea of providing adequate storm drain facilities, so we expanded and deepened the core area pond to provide additional capacity and treatment, for that matter, for the downtown stormwater runoff. And then in two phases, both in '89, one of the initial agency investments was to develop a parking garage for downtown and create a movie theater as part of that project. And that was a great partnership with our city policies that really directed entertainment and focused them downtown as opposed to allowing them to sprawl on the periphery, which I think is one of the probably the most key principles, primary policies that we've had in place to really leverage what downtown could become, and it has really sustained downtown dining and retail and culture for that matter. And then later in the 90s, we assembled some property and built another parking garage at the 4th and G block that was redevelopment agency funded with a covenant for use of that garage. So this is a 5th and G property, blocks bound by 5th, 4th, G, and the railroad tracks. Used to be predominantly auto repair, auto used cars, and restaurants. Agency assembled the property, secured a development partner, which then in turn secured USDA as an anchor tenant on the office building, as well as adding 5-screen movie theater, 11,000 square feet of retail with the 425 space garage. Really transformed the block, but the best story here on this project comes later, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I think with these investments, what we saw was the campus starting to notice that the community really had something going in downtown, and they had the Aggie Village property as an asset that they had kind of ignored for a while, trying to figure out what to do with it. Seeing an opportunity to actually create a housing opportunity site for their faculty and staff. They pursued the development of their property for faculty and staff housing. I think, really recognizing the value of having their faculty and staff in close proximity to the campus, but also the attraction effort it provided for them to recruit and retain good faculty and staff by having the cultural and social amenities that downtown had to offer was key to their decision making. They also took a piece and secured a private development partner, Mark Friedman, to develop the Borders, soon to be Whole Foods. Davis Commons Shopping Center has been a great addition to downtown, added a lot of life and energy and induced retail development. So with all this initial public investment, we started to see the private sector, not just the campus, start to wake up to the opportunity to do some projects downtown. This was across from Central Park on 3rd Street. A building built in 1920, had 4 units in it, very substandard in terms of the housing condition. Local developer Chuck Rowe acquired the property after multiple attempts of other people, worked with the city to change some of the development standards and in lieu fees, and the agency provided a modest amount of fee credit to allow the project to pencil financially, and it now is an icon in downtown across from Central Park and really plays off of the energy happening at the park. KFC, you can't see it here, the sign came down, but Kentucky Fried Chicken site, which is just north of the Natsulis Gallery on E Street, was another prime opportunity site. Chuck Rowe snatched it up, and again, with very minimal redevelopment agency assistance under a fee assistance program, pulled together the financing to develop a 3-story mixed-use retail office and live-work on the top.
I remember hanging out there in high school. But yeah.
KFC?
Yeah.
That explains a lot.
Nice.
So this is another important project, the Terminal Hotel project. Controversial, certainly at the time, but I think now people see the value that it's added to the community in the downtown. The agency partnered with the developer of the site and the property owner to help move some infrastructure and create a plaza on the east side of the property to create an opportunity for the building to welcome people that were coming off of the train station and create a real gateway into the downtown and a great synergy between the downtown and the train station. So as part of our project participation, we also paid for some improvements to the roadway and entryway into the depot. And now this is the view as one is disembarking from the Amtrak and approaching Davis on a beautiful sunny spring day, dodging all the bikes. So then we started to see projects happen without redevelopment agency assistance. And this one here is McCormick Building. Again, took after the model of ground floor retail office, second floor office space and live work. Not a single dollar redevelopment agency assistance went into this project. Directly, also the Row Building at 5th and G, former gas station, redeveloped. I think both of these projects would not have happened, however, if the agency had not invested in the 5th and G project. You wouldn't see this built next to the used car lots and the contaminated site that was there before, and without the parking investment and the retail that went with it. So that then spurred the other gas station site across the street on at G and 5th Street there, former Hoffman Station, to convert to Yolo Federal Credit Union, which is now complete, and another great asset in addition to downtown, which the agency did not provide any assistance in seeing that project come to fruition directly. So the agency also took stock in the council's desire to add to the cultural amenities downtown. Pence Gallery had been leasing this building from the city of Davis. The land was donated to the city, and the city had been giving them a fair lease, and then they went through a fundraising campaign, and we assisted in that fundraising campaign, about $150,000 to help finance their new gallery expansion. We also looked to our historic assets that we own downtown, Historic City Hall. As we saw opportunities to reuse those, we reinvested in those facilities to accomplish not just historic preservation, but also our economic development goals, and attracting sit-down restaurant, in this case, was a specific objective of the city to create really a restaurant renaissance that I think happened around the time that the city made the effort to convert Historic City Hall. Certainly we also invested in Varsity Theater in acquisition, and then ultimately the renovation and conversion of it back to a two-screen movie theater, now an independent movie theater downtown. Also looked to some other cultural amenities that we could partner with local, not just university, but also local nonprofit organization, California Bicycle Museum, and secured the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame. And the agency acquired the 3rd and B building and provided some seed funding for the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame and National Bicycle Museum, which is now in operation there today, and a great visitor attraction amenity. So that sort of marked the point where redevelopment started to get a target on its back. We still had plans with a lot of other projects in the works, which I'll touch on, and we are continuing to advance those with some caution. The Hallmark Inn project I'll touch on. We've talked about it a little bit before, and the council's given direction to move forward with partnering with the property owner there to convert the ground floor hotel units to retail, and the agency will provide some funding for the streetscape improvements to complement that renovation. We're also advancing the 3rd Street Promenade project between A and B Streets downtown, which you reviewed last summer. The initial design concepts gave direction to move forward with the construction documents. We're now at about 60% completion of those documents. We have secured $1.4 million in SACOG funding to help pay for that project, and we're in the process of completing the construction documents, and we'll come back to you with the final project funding scenario and cost estimates before sending that out to bid. And then finally, the Hotel Conference Center project is one that certainly we've talked about a fair amount. While we're not in active negotiations with a development agreement with that property owner, we are advancing the market feasibility analysis to evaluate the potential for the scale and size of project and the quality of the project that the city and the developer are seeking to pursue there, including the conference center. That market analysis should be completed within the next month.